Washington finally gets some transfer portal help at wide receiver.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click the little bell as well, so never miss when we post new show. Plus, for on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers out there on this Monday. I got to spend some time talking about the struggles that UW basketball suffered against not just Michigan, but Michigan State as well. Certainly a very disappointing last week or so in that regard. I want to talk about who else might be in Jedd Fisch's transfer portal plans, because after the addition of Kennesaw State wide receiver Christian Moss on Sunday, Washington has 5 more additions according to Jedd's math. That is. So with that being said, let's dive into Christian Moss, because this is a really nice addition for what Washington was looking for. And obviously, they've whiffed on a lot of top targets, which has been frustrating, to say the least, as you everydayers know. We talked about that on a show this past week. But this is a guy, when you look at what Christian Moss brings to the table, it's very clear that all the physical tools for success are there. 6'3", 199 pounds. And he produced this past year at Kennesaw State. I know it's a lower level, but he still produced 45 catches, 689 yards, a pair of touchdowns. I look at all that and I say, awesome. This is solid. This is exactly what you're looking for from a fifth-year senior, where, of course, you'd be looking for a guy that has even more production, right? You look at a guy like Daryl Gill, who we talked about, that went to Ole Miss, or some of the other targets that Washington has unfortunately missed out on. But this is a guy where there were some other programs that were in the mix, with the Ohio State, Kansas, Stanford. I know those were the other ones that were listed by 247 Sports' Matt Zenitz that were in the mix for his services. So I think that when you look at what you're getting from Christian Moss for one season, it's exactly what you hope for, right? Where I look at a guy who's big, long, super strong, able to win in contested catch situations, able to find ways to release off the line of scrimmage in press coverage, because he has the length to hand battle back with defensive backs and find ways to just get himself releases off the line of scrimmage in one way or another, whether it be through physicality, through his footwork, and through other different things. I look at it and I think that his long speed to be able to stretch the field from the X spot is solid. It's adequate. I don't think it's elite by any stretch of the imagination, but this is also coming from, a program where we've been able to see some dudes who were 4.4 and below over the last couple of years, with the Omari Evans, who can really run out of that position. Obviously, we've seen Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan be able to do that. If you want to go all the way back to John Ross, because I certainly loved watching him, I think that it's fair. It's not necessarily a comparison, obviously, because he's just a very different type of receiver. But again, in terms of what Washington is looking for right now, this is great, because in his last year of eligibility, you can sit here and say, okay, this is a guy who's not necessarily going to block the way for a Justice Williams if he breaks out during spring camp or fall camp. As all you everydayers know, that's certainly somebody that I'm very high on and going to be watching very, very closely in that regard. If Jordan Clay, the Navy All-American Bowls Offensive Player of the Year, comes in and explodes, that's great. Of course, you're going to be happy with that, right? And that kid shows that he can, at the very least, be in the rotation as a true freshman. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And adding a player like Christian Moss to this room just gives you what you don't have there right now at the X position. And that's somebody with experience. That position as a whole has 2 catches for 28 yards at the college level. And both of those came from Justice Williams against UC Davis in week 2. And that's just not good enough. That is not enough for what Jedd Fisch and Demond Williams and what this offense wants to do in 2026. You need more. And I think, again, Christian Moss is somebody that you can look at in that regard and say, okay, this is solid. This is adequate. This is moving in the right direction. I don't mean that to knock his talent in any way, because there's a lot of questions that are going around right now of, well, this guy played at a lower level. Can he come back and do that again at a higher level in the Big Ten? And I think that is a very, very fair question, and one I certainly have as well. But when you look at his skill set, when you turn on the film, everything that is needed to succeed is all there. And now it's a matter of Kevin Cummings and Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty finding a way to be able to put that together on the field in practices and everything like that. And I think that's all very, very possible because this is a guy who coming out of high school did have Power 4 looks and did wind up at Virginia Tech for a year. And obviously there were some just interesting things that happened with his eligibility, which is why he's able to come back for this season. If you want to go read more about that, our good buddy Christian Capel over at On Montlake wrote a tremendous piece about that. I believe it was in his transfer portal tracker. But all of that it certainly matters here because having someone with that kind of experience who can come in and you can lean on as being a just veteran leader in that room, which you don't have at this point in time because Rasheed Williams has injury questions. Dezmen Roebuck is somebody that obviously this coaching staff, after being a freshman All-American, that they're looking for to continue stepping up and continue just really thriving. You look at these other true freshmen. Yeah, Trez Davis is really talented. Yeah, Mason James is really, really talented. But it's always really hard for, guys like that to come in and step in as a leader right away. They could step in and contribute. I really like what Trez Davis brings to the table. I really like what Mason James brings to the table. But asking them to contribute and asking them to be leaders and veterans and guys who can, help work and be a player coach for, lack of a better term, or different things like that is a completely different conversation. And I think it's still important. I think it's still something that's possible. And bringing in a guy like Christian Moss is a great step in that direction. And the more that I look at what he brings to the table, more I think, okay, yeah, this fits, this works. And with 1 year of eligibility remaining, again, if Justice Williams just comes into spring camp and beats him out, great. All of a sudden, you don't have these depth issues that we saw this past year when Denzel Boston went down. You see all these injuries where Raiden Feinsbright had to miss that UCLA game as well after the concussion he suffered against Purdue. Those depth issues are not there when you have just so many more guys in the mix. And again, we know this coaching staff wants to rely on true freshmen. You can think of that whatever you will, but that's the case. That's what we're going to see on the field. And I think that with this group of talent that Washington has, and Chris Lawson being another guy who I believe can step up and certainly play a bigger role in the offense this season, all of that at wide receiver is great. It's solid. It's promising enough, but I still think you need more. And the guy who I'm certainly going to be keeping a very close eye on in the coming days, especially after Zion Carney from Oklahoma, who looked like was very interested in coming to Washington, got a crystal ball to Wisconsin. It doesn't look like he's going to wind up visiting here for a couple of different reasons. But I think that Nico Brown from Yale is a talent that Washington feels really solid about at this point in time because he is just a really nice separator, whether he be in the Z, in the slot. He's one of those versatile guys that can move around in this Jedd Fisch offense and play multiple positions, which is something we talk about a lot on this show when it comes to the Trez Davises, the Mason Jameses, the Dezmen Roebucks, and Chris Lawsons of the world who can move back and forth between those two positions and just give the defense a whole bunch of different looks. I think Nico Brown fits that very well. And after pulling in 71 catches for 1,085 yards and 11 touchdowns at Yale this past season in 10 games, he obviously fits that mold really well. And this is a guy where you look at some of the other visits he's been on. He's visited several other Big Ten schools over the past couple of weeks. Michigan State, UCLA were in the mix. And then he visited Alabama following his UW visit on Thursday, Friday. And now he's at Stanford as I record this on Sunday evening. So this is a guy who absolutely is getting those higher end looks. And I think that he's just another guy who would come in and fit what you're trying to do really, really well. And I've heard from some sources around just talent evaluations that he is projected out as a power 4 wide receiver 2. So somebody who can just come in and give you more because that's exactly what you're looking for. And again, if somebody on this roster reserve just emerges and becomes that wide receiver 1, again, of course you're happy with that. Who wouldn't be, right? But the more you look at it, the more you just need more production in that room. And the fact that there are still 5 more guys that Washington is looking at taking out of the transfer portal is certainly a very, very good sign. And so with that being said, let's dive into a couple more guys that I think Washington should keep an eye on. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel has given all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. You can ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup, take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming, or build a parlay around the players and moments you think decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the perfect place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. Thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Huskies, which is compatible to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. It's so cool because it's an invite to the members-only Locked On Everyday Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show, and I'll be hanging out there as well. And if you're really interested, you can click the link down in the description below or go to lockedonhuskies.supercast.com. And as we move right along here on today's show, I want to talk about some of these other guys that I think Washington should be going after in the transfer portal. And one thing to note here is I've seen some questions about this where maybe there will be one or two more departures from Washington. We'll officially find out on Tuesday because you get 48 business hours to process transfer paperwork. So the window is closed for almost every team, but there's still, might be some guys that trickle in here and there. So it's something to monitor over the next couple of days. And one thing I'm really interested in here is, as we've talked about, Washington, after the Christian Moss acquisition on Sunday, is going to be looking at taking 5 more guys in the transfer portal. And I'm curious to see if they're eyeing anybody on Indiana or Miami that maybe they're hearing wants to enter the portal or is just waiting until after the national championship run to do so. Because keep in mind that those two teams get until January 24th. They get 5 extra days to enter the portal to, keep from a boat mule kind of situation happening like it did last year, where, you just give those guys more time. And I really like that. I think that's a smart move. And again, this is something to keep a close eye on as things go along, because if we see a couple of those guys trickle in there, maybe there is somebody on Indiana's roster or somebody on Miami's roster that Washington is really interested in and they wind up making a push for. So just keep that in mind as you watch the national championship game on Monday night. Just something to throw around out there. One guy, though, who I really want to talk about, because we know Washington needs more help on the defensive line. And one guy that I think would be really, really beneficial to what Ryan Walters is looking for on the interior is Aiden Keanaaina from Cal. This guy, 6'3", 320 pounds, had 101 tackles over his 2 years at Cal after transferring from Notre Dame, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. The production is absolutely there. It's not necessarily disruptive production, but it's there. It's exactly what you're looking for. It's someone who can come in and be a stopgap force for you in the middle of the defense that can rotate in and out really well with the rest of the guys that you have there, where, I'm sure we've talked about it on the show, and I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter or somewhere else, that Deshaun Watts was one of the highest graded run defenders by Pro Football Focus, regardless of level, in college football this past season. That's huge. That's crucial. And obviously you want to see some more production from him moving forward. You'd like to see him be able to get more tackles for loss, more sacks, different things like that, of course, right? But one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that you can keep these guys all fresh. And it was nice to hear Jedd Fisch give Omar Khan a shout out and say that he's someone who he's keeping an eye on. Obviously, Tiamu Kais is someone that they have really, really high expectations for in 2026. But this defensive line still needs more, because Darren Conley, Deshaun Watts, and Kai McClendon are a solid trio of transfer portal acquisitions. You add that alongside Trez Davis, alongside the 2 other guys I'm talking about. That's solid. That's what you need, right? You want 6, 7, 8 guys rotating in along the defensive front. But if Ryan Walters wants to move back to more of these 5 down fronts to try to get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback, try to free up some of these linebackers to rush off the edge or do some different things, you are going to need even more defensive tackles. And we talked about it a lot. It felt like Armand and Javon Parker might be the guys that they were looking for in that regard. They chose to enter the transfer portal. I'm very curious to see where they end up, because that's something where obviously the injuries were such a big question mark with both of them, between what Armand has been dealing with through his entire career, and then Javon with the knee, and then obviously the Achilles as well. So I'm curious to see what happens with those guys, because that is one of the biggest reasons that you need to go out and get more. I was really hoping to see a big bounce back season from Javon Parker, and I still obviously hope that he does that wherever it is that he winds up. But I think Aiden Keanaaina in his last season of college football is a redshirt senior, is a perfect stand-in for what you're looking for in that regard. Because again, the production is there. 50 tackles in 2024, 60-something tackles in 2025. That's great. That's what you need on the interior, are these guys who can wrap up. and really just help a run defense that was already one of the nation's best in 2025. And if Ryan Walters thinks that group can take another step forward in 2026 after being number 12 in the nation this past season, awesome. That's great. That's exactly what you hope for. And I think that a guy like that is one of these, again, veteran additions that you're looking for, and someone who, unlike Darren Conley, unlike Deshaun Watts, is coming from another Power 4 program. And it's not, I don't think that, I'm trying to say anything against those guys, because wherever you come from, if you can play, you can play. That's what matters at the end of the day. And I just think that having a guy like Aiden Keanaaina with that proven production in Power 4 football is exactly what you need. And you can come in, you can give that guy a real handle on the rest of the room, because he can be, like we're talking about with Christian Moss, a veteran presence, somebody who can really help some of these guys along, as a lot of them are still going to be adjusting to Power 4 football. We've barely seen Omar Khan play. Yes, he's been on campus for 2 years, but it's very clear that this staff saw him as a more of a developmental kind of prospect. And as he continues to develop, having somebody like that in the system, where I'm sure that Aiden Keanaaina is the perfect kind of comparison for what this staff believes a high end of Omar Khan can be, as a big, stout, strong, high floor run defender kind of player who can give you that production in the middle. Maybe they want to see him a little bit more at nose tackle. I don't know. It's certainly just something to kick around in your mind, because that is the kind of player that this defense really needs to keep moving forward, and someone who can also just get after the quarterback a little bit. The production is, again, it's there in terms of stopping the run. And I'm curious to see that if what Ryan Walters' defense might be able to do for a guy like that can just unlock some different things in the pass rush as well. But with that being said, let's talk about a couple other guys that I'm really curious about. And let's start with a former 4-star UW commit under Kalen DeBoer in Dominic Kirks. This is a guy who the production's not there at all. He's played in 6 games over 2 seasons for Ohio State, recorded just 2 tackles, but with 3 years of eligibility remaining at 6'4", 250 pounds, this is a guy that Washington's previous staff wanted to take a good hard look at. And I don't see why Jedd Fisch and his current staff shouldn't as well, because if you want to get more off the edge from a big, strong dude who can help you set the edge and run defense, I feel like this is a guy who can do that. And obviously, we know from just the days in high school, yes, it's a very, very different game at the college level, that he can get after the quarterback. And as we look at what this room is right now, there are just so many question marks. Of course, Washington has high hopes for Jacob Lane and Logan George and Russell Davis and Isaiah Ward and these 2 freshmen in J.D. Hill and Derek Coleman-Bruce, alongside whatever you might get from Hayden Moore and Devin Hyde as well, where we obviously saw Devin Hyde a decent amount in 2025. But I throw all those names out there like that because there are still some questions to be had, where I think Jacob Lane had a really solid step forward this past season. It was unfortunate we didn't get to see more of Russell Davis. It was unfortunate we didn't get to see more of Isaiah Ward after he got hurt. But it's very clear that Washington wants some more of these guys who can be true 3-down edge guys for you. And I think that as this roster is shaping up right now, again, like we're talking about with Jordan Clay, if J.D. Hill turns into that guy, if Derek Coleman-Bruce turns into that guy right off the bat, nobody's going to be mad about that, right? But that is just so much to put on any true freshman, let alone playing edge rusher, outside linebacker in the Big Ten. That is so difficult. And adding a guy like this, who at the very least has 2 years of reps against one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten under his belt at Ohio State, that's something that you can take a look at and say, oh, okay, yeah, there's certainly ways that we can find a way to take a chance on this guy, bring him in. Let's see if our coaching staff can help figure that out and help get the most out of him. I just think that's something to kick around, something to keep in mind, because the other guy that I'm curious about, and you every day know, I've talked about him before as it pertains to the transfer portal, is we've talked about this a lot in terms of what other position Washington might be going after, because as I've said, I think that we're going to see another wide receiver come in, gives you 2 there, 2 defensive linemen, that gives you 4, and we're searching for 2 more additions on this team. Maybe after Hunter Solwald enters the transfer portal, they're looking for a backup long snapper as a PWO, preferred walk-on kind of guy. But I'm still really intrigued with Vander Ploog, the former 4-star tight end, one-time Washington commit to Jedd Fisch's staff in the 2025 cycle, obviously winds up at Oregon just before signing day. And now he's back in the transfer portal after 1 year there, and he's taken a visit to North Carolina State. But as I look at this room, and as I look at the injury history that this group has had over the last couple of years, if you want to add another body to that position, because maybe somebody does wind up transferring. Maybe somebody winds up medically retiring with just some of the issues that that group has seen. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. And if this coaching staff was looking for somebody who is, or they already felt that something like that was going to happen and they wanted to take somebody who come in and start right away, I think they would have gone harder after Dorian Thomas from New Mexico State, who winds up at Cal, obviously was with them at Arizona. But with a guy like Vander Ploog, with what he brings, I think that this is just someone who, if you want to take another year to redshirt him, put some weight on his frame, or obviously he can't redshirt, but just another year, just kind of on the back burner where he can add some weight to his frame and try to develop into somebody who you can use as an inline blocker, but you can split out the slot, out wide, whatever it is, and do some different things with. I wouldn't necessarily be shocked. And there are just so many different ways to get creative with a talent like that with the rest of the guys in the room, where it feels like Washington is very confident going into the season at that position with what they've gotten from Decker to Graf. I think we still need to see him improve more as a blocker with what Cade Eldridge gave in that H-back, moving into a fullback kind of role, just moving all over the formation. I think that was fun, and you like to see that, but it also feels like the staff is very, very confident in sophomore Bear Naone. And as we get into spring camp, that's one of those guys where if he is competing for a starting spot, I'm not going to be shocked at all. But I say that because Bear Naone and Vander Ploog were supposed to be in the 2025 class together. And it felt like that was going to be just kind of what the future of the position was, with Barron as the inline blocker who can certainly do some stuff for you as a pass catcher, but then Vander as someone who you can move around all over the formation, just get isolated in mismatches and different things like that, and be a big time threat for you, especially in the red zone. I'm curious to see if they want to do something like that. I think it might be an outside shot at this point in time, but I wanted to throw that out because it's just, again, like I was saying earlier, just something to kick around, something to think about, because this certainly is a roster that has a lot of promise, but you want to try to upgrade that and continue to unlock it in any way possible. And a guy like Vander Ploog would certainly do that for you, especially close to the goal line. But let's switch gears here because it's been a tough week for Washington basketball in a variety of ways. Right after a message from our good friends over at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to just take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. As we come down the stretch here, let's talk about Desmond Claude first, because this is a really interesting situation where he just has seemingly left the team, where he put out a statement on Friday night ahead of Washington's matchup with number 12 Michigan State and just said that he was coming back really quickly from a grade 3 ankle sprain, which we were all aware of. He made that public following his return to action in late November against Southern University, and said that he was pretty much that he was overcompensating and it caused a knee injury, and he had to step away from all basketball activities. Danny Sprinkle, in his post-game presser following the 80-63 loss to the Spartans on Saturday, said something along the lines of, yeah, he said he's injured, and went on to talk about the great healthcare system that the University of Washington offers its student athletes and all its students. So you don't really need to read between the lines there to think that there is certainly something going on. And from the way that Sprinkle had talked about him previously, with the personal issue that caused him to miss practice the day before the Ohio State game, and then that it was a team decision for him to not play against Ohio State, and then obviously barely playing against Michigan, taking him out in the second half against Purdue as well. There was certainly something going on there. I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it. Danny refused to comment further on the matter at the time, so we'll see what that looks like as things continue to move forward, but I was curious. I wanted to get that out there because it's just another one of these weird things that has gone on with this UW basketball team this year, where this is on top of all the bad injury luck that this team has suffered so far this season. It feels like right when things are starting to get healthy, right when these guys are really starting to click, like we saw during the Ohio State game, things just go wrong. And there were points in this game against Michigan where it looked like, oh, okay, yeah, this team is making strides. They're moving in the right direction. There's a lot to be excited about here. And against Michigan State, obviously, Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches in the country, and it looked like it in that game where there were so many Michigan State fans there as well. I'm sure some of that had to do with the Seahawks game, but that was just one of those games where it was very clear that there's still a divide, where there were points in this game where it felt like Washington showed that they have the talent to hang with some stronger teams. However, Michigan State just had that much more. And it's really frustrating because, like we've talked about a lot on this show, the talent is there on this team to reach the NCAA tournament and do all these things. But with the injuries, with everything else that has gone on, they've just almost become insurmountable at this point in time, where there was a point in this Michigan State game about halfway through the first half, where it was after Kurtang hit back-to-back threes, where it's, oh man, this feels like it's going to be a tough hole to climb out of. After that moment, when Michigan State went up, I believe it was 19-13 at the time, Washington never got the lead back inside 5 points after that. And again, that was with about 12 minutes plus to play in the first half. And that's really frustrating. And it's not that this team doesn't have the talent, but there's just something going on here that is really frustrating. And there's a certain point where obviously it all comes back to the head coach. I saw Mick Cronin talking the other day about like, hey, I recruited these guys. So at the end of the day, it's on me. And that's what Danny said last year as well, following the loss to Indiana, that we need to, go out and get better players who are going to be more committed to team first, that kind of stuff. And I feel like there is certainly a lot of buy-in on this team, but there is just a lot of bad luck and a lot of frustration. And at a certain point, it's going to boil over. And when you look at some of these numbers, where Washington in their last 5 games combined from 3-point range, they are 32 for 117. And that is good for 27%. Shout out to our good buddy Alex Katzen, friend of the program over at Huskies Wire, who found that stat. That is just absolutely exhausting, because you look at a lot of the shots they're taking and they're not bad shots. Like, that's the biggest problem with all this. That's where it all just gets really, really exhausting. Then you look at what's coming next down the pipeline. Number 8, Nebraska, has been arguably the hottest team in the country all year. They haven't lost yet. Like, it's just one of these things that's going to continue to get worse. And it's great that Jacob Ognisevich is back. He's someone who has proven that he, especially in that game against Michigan, he looks like somebody who can actually make a nice difference, whether he's in the starting lineup, coming off the bench. That's a dude who can shoot it from 3-point range. He's another 40% shooter at his last stop. Obviously hit a pair of 3-pointers against Michigan as well. Didn't play a whole ton in this game against Michigan State, but is just another guy who you hope can add to that. Wesley Yates being back, as long as his wrist is right, is somebody who also should be able to add to that. But he's been down from last year in terms of 3-point percentage, as has Kimari Peterson. And it's great seeing Zoom Diallo take a step forward from deep. Bryson Tucker certainly has gotten more opportunities compared to last year at Indiana, where he was dealing with the finger injury. So the talent is there, and getting through this stretch of games was always going to be a grind. It was always going to be extremely difficult. After the Nebraska game, you look forward, and Oregon is next. And it's not like the games are going to get so much easier, because the Big Ten is just such a talented basketball conference. But I still have hope for what's ahead. And feel free to disagree with me. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are just, I'm tired of UW basketball. I'm tired of every season being the same old, year in and year out. I am too. It's getting exhausting, where it's, oh yeah, there is a lot of promise on this team. Oh, they have this, and that. Okay, this should work. That should work. And then those things, for one reason or another, just don't seem to come together. And it's getting exhausting. But I look at the schedule following the game against Nebraska, and I feel like the Huskies do have a major chance to get right. And I think that this team is starting to click, where Danny's talked about it, saying, okay, yeah, you look at the Michigan State game, you look at Michigan, you go back to the Ohio State game. It's very clear that this team is improving and taking steps in the right direction, but that doesn't matter anymore. Those are not, like, the moral victories are over. They're through. They're done with. You cannot keep doing that and expect to find ways to get back to the tournament, which is what the goal with this roster needs to be. You can't just sit there and say, oh, okay, yeah, we're happy going from 4-16 in Big Ten play to, 8-12. let's call it this season. No, that's not good enough. You need to take a big step forward. And I want to sit here and believe that it's coming, but I just don't know anymore. And I think that there is, again, a lot to be excited about with this team, with what Hannes Steinbach brings on a night in, night out basis, with how Zoom Diallo has stepped forward and taken charge. What we saw from JJ Mandequit against Michigan is a really exciting glimpse into the future. What Kimari Peterson has been able to bring as he started to find his stroke a little bit more consistently from three-point range. When you're blending all of those things together as Frank Kepnang continues to get better and better, I've been so impressed with watching him over the last couple of weeks. He's still obviously going to be himself on the defensive end of the floor and certainly gets over-aggressive at times, but the highlight reel plays, what he can be when everything is going right for him, when he's healthy, when he's out there, is certainly an impactful force. And as Lathan Somerville continues to get healthy, as Bryson Tucker continues to settle into his new role in the starting lineup with Desmond Claude away from the team now, with everything else that's going on, it's very clear that this team has the talent to compete. I think that Danny Sprinkle is still the guy who can be the right coach for all of this, but it's just whatever it is that's not working, there are no more excuses. There can't be anything. And Danny's always really good about saying, yeah, nobody cares that we're injured. Nobody cares about this. Nobody cares about that. And that's great. That's all correct. That's all right. But this stretch of games, just it needs to come to an end. And I'm curious to see what they look like at number 8 Nebraska, because on Wednesday, because again, like that's not going to be an easy test by any stretch of the imagination, obviously, right? I know, super hard hitting analysis there, but I look down the pipeline at Oregon and Minnesota and everything else that's coming up, and you are going to have an opportunity to really just kind of climb back into the standings and just get another leg up. Getting that win against Ohio State was big. That was a really, really big win, but you need to find a way to build on it. And yes, we all knew it was going to be really difficult, but moving forward, these moral victories, all that, again, that just cannot be the case anymore, because I know that there are a lot of people, like I was saying a few minutes ago, who want to get excited about this team because, oh yeah, it's very clear that they knew what they needed to do to improve, and they went out and they did that in the transfer portal. And it is hard to build a culture and build all these things when you have 2 returning guys and you have to look at bringing in a whole new roster on a year in, year out basis. Yeah, that all is extremely difficult. But again, that's happening all over the country. And teams all over the country are finding ways to figure that out. And Washington needs to get in that boat quickly. And I think Zoom Diallo is a guy who, the more you talk to him, the more he just continues to step into this leadership role, and the passion that he has for this program, being a local guy, is really exciting, and it's great. And it's exactly what you need. But again, it's all of the other things, they're all out the window now. And I'm really curious to see what these next couple of weeks are going to look like on the basketball court, because the opportunity will be there for Washington to find themselves and take that step forward, but they need to seize it, and they need to do it fast. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.